the Army 86 reforms went a bit motorcycle crazy. For messenger service, Field Artillery Battalion comms platoons and tank companies got 2 motorcycles, while Maneuver Battalion comms platoons got 4. A lot of these motorcycles actually did stay under the Army of Excellence reforms that replaced the tentative Army 86 tables. Airborne, Air Assault, and Light Infantry battalions even got 15 motorcycles in their support platoons that weren't in Army 86. These were for providing companies with messengers ad hoc or outfitting the Infantry Battalion Scout Platoon, which was otherwise foot mobile. So you still get photos of American motorcycle scouts during Desert Storm, the Team Spirit exercises in Korea, and Bright Star exercises in Egypt during the 1980s, although these were quietly withdrawn in the 1990s. Very sad. However, a little more interestingly, there were some efforts to have permanently resourced motorcycle scout platoons and units. The first one we'll cover is the Army 86 Motorcycle Platoon under the Div Cav Squadron. Second, the Light Attack and Combined Arms Battalion Scout Platoons of the Experimental Motorized Division. And lastly, some test platoons the Army ran on integrating motorcycles into more conventional scout platoons. These, however, wouldn't survive the 1980s. The tentative J-Series Army 86 Motorcycle Platoon was removed from the final L-Series Army of Excellence. Its purpose was to improve command and control capability in a degraded environment. Say for example the enemy is jamming the division's area of operations. The motorcycle platoon would insist an internal C2 by maintaining contact with adjacent units, like linking 2 brigades together, or pushing out to find an out-of-contact unit and relay orders, like being tasked by the division commander to find a brigade in an MBC environment. Using messengers can reduce the length and frequency of radio communications, which can get longer when in a chemical or radiological environment. You emit, you die, etc., etc. They could also be used as guides for maneuver units following the main DivCav recon units, basically aiding your maneuver battalions in following the scouts over unfamiliar terrain and conducting a forward passage of lines. Motorcycles here were mostly envisioned for being used in areas where contact with the enemy was unlikely and in isolated or restrictive terrain. Doing some light traffic control, which would otherwise require augmentation by a military police unit, would allow the division to mass and disperse maneuver units rapidly, make sure their navigation is accurate, and minimize battlefield clutter by monitoring the movement of combat support and service units. However, plans to include motorcycle, NBC recon, and electronic surveillance platoons in the Squadron HHT were cancelled. Instead, a long-range surveillance detachment was added to the squadron, although this was soon moved to the division's military intelligence battalion. But if it had stayed, the motorcycle platoon would consist of 13 motorcycles. 12 were split into 4 squads of 3, each including a sergeant squad leader, specialist scout, and private first class scout, all authorized M16A1 rifles. The 13th motorcycle was carried in a 1.25-ton Gamma Goat amphibious 6x6 truck. The Gamma Goat also carried a platoon sergeant and PFC acting as scout driver. Interestingly, the motorcycle platoon as written in 1981 reference data doesn't have an officer as platoon leader, while the other specialist platoons do. I assume if this went into general service, they probably would have added an officer eventually. Later under Army of Excellence, the Light Attack and Combined Arms Battalions of the Motorized 9th Infantry Division included a scout platoon under its Combat Support Company. This was that Cold War dune buggy formation you sometimes see photos of. This platoon included a platoon HQ with 2 M1025 armament carrier Humvees mounting Mark 19 automatic grenade launchers for the platoon leader and platoon sergeant, as well as 2 scout sections. Each section consisted of an armament carrier Humvee and 2 motorcycles under a staff sergeant, with enough scouts to triple man the Humvee in addition to each motorcycle. This basically died though when the 9th Infantry was deactivated in 1990, also very sad. Note that this was all meant to be a substitute for 6 dune buggy type fast attack vehicles or FAVs, but this Humvee motorcycle mix was used in the interim. Shortly before the 9th Infantry's deactivation, the US Army was conducting training center tests and simulations of a new tank battalion scout platoon. There were 3 options: the already existing platoon with 6 cavalry fighting vehicles, a mixed platoon with 4 CFVs, 6 Humvees, and 4 motorcycles mounted on the back of those Humvees, and a lighter platoon with 10 Humvees and 4 motorcycles. In the 90s, tank battalions actually did move to the 10 Humvee scout platoon design pretty much, except without the motorcycles. Very sad. This was a substantial paradigm shift from more aggressive reconnaissance with substantial security capabilities to a pure reconnaissance formation meant to avoid contact. But back in 1989, they found that a hypothetical 10 Humvee 4 motorcycle platoon detected 2.34 times as many threats as the 6 CFV platoon, and 3.44 times the second echelon elements. This was attributed to the stealthiness of the motorcycles, allowing for better penetration of scouts who had an easier time reaching good observation points. That platoon design also had more sensors, 14 instead of just 6. CFVs were obviously more survivable if hit, but were more detectable. For a motorcycle, their survivability was in their stealth, and that platoon design was generally able to continue their scouting mission for longer. However, that test did not involve engaging the enemy intentionally. Thus, it did not test a security mission, where Cav would be tasked with delaying and attriting the enemy. The trade between stealth and sensor-oriented scouts for enhanced observation versus combat-capable armored vehicles for superior security has been something that the US Army ping-pongs back and forth on all the time. Learn more about the evolution of American forces with this 100-year look at the US Army Tank Company. I take you through the organizational evolution of American tank companies from the invention of the tank to the modern day, examining 14 distinct TO&Es. I'll see you over there.